Emma Carter slapped the deed out of Victor Holt's hand and watched it flutter to the dusty floor of the sheriff's office. Every man in that room went silent. Victor's face turned the color of a bad sunset, dark, dangerous, and wrong in ways that didn't have names yet. "You falsified every single one of these land titles," she said, her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking hard. "I kept your books for 4 years. I know every number, every date, every signature that doesn't belong, and I can prove it." Victor smiled then, slow, cold, the kind of smile that told a woman she had just made the worst mistake of her life. "If this story already has your heart pounding, you are exactly where you need to be. Hit that subscribe button right now, ring the bell so you never miss a single chapter, and drop your city down in the comments. I want to see just how far this story travels." Now let's get back to Emma Carter, because her worst night is only just beginning. The sheriff's name was Dale Pruitt, and he had worked for Victor Holt for 11 years without anyone in Redstone, Wyoming saying a word about it out loud. That was the kind of town Redstone was. The kind of town where everybody knew which way the wind blew and made sure they were standing on the right side of it before they opened their mouths. Emma Carter had never been good at standing on the right side of things. She stood in the middle of Pruitt's office with her satchel clutched against her chest, and 14 separate documents spread across the desk between her and the 2 men who were looking at her now like she had lost her mind entirely. "Miss Carter." Pruitt cleared his throat and looked sideways at Victor. "I think you ought to be real careful about what you're saying right now." "I've been careful for 4 years," Emma said. "That's long enough." Victor Holt hadn't moved from where he stood beside the window. He was a large man, not tall but wide across the shoulders, with thick hands and pale eyes that never quite focused on the person he was talking to. He always looked slightly past you, like he was already calculating what came next. He picked up the deed Emma had slapped out of his hand. He smoothed it against his coat, folded it once, and slipped it back into his breast pocket without looking at it. Then he looked at Emma. "You want to explain to me," he said quietly, "what exactly you think you found." "I don't think anything," Emma said. "I know. The Halverson homestead was filed under Parcel 14C in the Territorial Registry in 1877. You have a deed here dated 1876 transferring it to the Redstone Land and Cattle Trust. That trust is yours. That means you filed the transfer a full year before the Halversons legally occupied the land, which means either you forged a date or you filed against land that wasn't legally claimable yet under the Homestead Act." She paused. "And that's just one of them." Pruitt shifted his weight and said nothing. Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Clara and Hector Halverson sold me that land willingly," he said, "signed and witnessed. Clara Halverson is 63 years old, and she doesn't read English," Emma said. "Hector Halverson died in February of 78. The signature on your deed is dated March of 78. She pulled another document from her satchel and laid it on the desk between them. "That's his death record from the county registry. I requested it 2 weeks ago." Pruitt looked at the paper, then he looked away. Victor's expression didn't change. That was the thing about him that had always made Emma's skin go cold. He didn't get angry the way other men did. He went still instead. Perfectly, absolutely still, the way a snake goes still before it moves. "Helen," he said calmly, looking past Emma's shoulder at his secretary in the outer office. "Would you go on and step out for a few minutes?" Emma heard the woman's chair scrape back, heard the front door open and close. She kept her eyes on Victor. "You've been a good employee," Victor said. 4 years is a long time. I've always said you had a sharp mind for numbers." He tilted his head slightly. "That's why this surprises me. A woman in your position making accusations like this, you understand what that does to a person standing in a town like Redstone." "I understand what forging land titles does to the families who lose them," Emma said. "Those families were compensated fairly. The Mulroney family received $40 for 160 acres. That land was rocky and half-flooded. The railroad survey maps show it sitting directly on the proposed Northern Line corridor," Emma said. "You paid them $40 for land that's going to be worth $40,000. She took a breath. And you did it to 11 families. I counted. For the first time, something shifted in Victor's pale eyes. He walked to the door of the inner office and closed it. Emma. His voice was very quiet now, almost gentle. You're a smart woman. Smarter than most men I've employed. So I'm going to talk to you like a smart woman. He folded his hands in front of him. You have no husband, no family here. You have a rented room above the laundry and a monthly wage that I sign. He let that sit for a moment. Everything you have in this territory I gave you. And everything you have I can take away. You know that. Emma's chest was very tight. I know that, she said. Then put those papers back in your bag, he said. Go back to the office. Forget what you've decided you've found, and we never have this conversation. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her documents one at a time, folded them carefully, and put them back in her satchel. Victor relaxed slightly. Emma buttoned the satchel closed, looked him directly in the eye, and said, I made copies. They're already posted. She walked out the front door of the sheriff's office and into the cold morning air of Redstone's main street before either of them found words again. She made it exactly 4 steps before Pruitt called after her. Miss Carter, you are hereby terminated from your position with Holt Land and Cattle effective immediately. Any further defamatory statements made against Mr. Holt will be addressed through the territorial court. Your personal effects will be collected from the office and left at the front steps of your rooming house by end of day. Emma didn't turn around. She kept walking. She made it to the alley between the general store and the feed merchant before her legs stopped working properly and she had to put one hand against the wooden wall to keep herself upright. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She had known in the rational part of her mind that she kept well organized and properly filed that this was how it would go. She had known since the night 3 weeks ago when she had been balancing Holt's quarterly ledgers and found the first inconsistency, a date that didn't add up a parcel number, that appeared twice under different names, that the moment she said something out loud, everything would change. She had known. Knowing something and living through it were 2 different animals entirely. She straightened up, pressed her hand flat against the satchel over her chest, felt the papers inside, and made herself breathe. One problem at a time. The first problem arrived by noon. Mrs. Deering, who owned the laundry and the 2 rooms above it, knocked on Emma's door with her hat in her hands and genuine regret on her face. I'm sorry, honey, she said. I truly am, but Victor Holt owns the note on this building. He called it in this morning. She couldn't quite meet Emma's eyes. I've got until end of week, but I can't. She stopped. I'm sorry. Emma told her she understood. She did understand. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, she had walked into 4 establishments looking for work and walked out of all 4. The last one, Miller's Dry Goods, where she had bought her flour and thread for 4 years without missing a single weekly payment. Old Mr. Miller had looked at her from behind his counter with something like pain on his face and said, I can't, Miss Carter. I'm sorry. I just can't. She stood in the street in front of his store and looked up and down the length of Redstone, Wyoming. The wind was coming in from the north sharp with the promise of the first real cold snap of October. People moved along the boardwalks, in and out of doorways, and not one of them looked at her. They all knew. In a town of 400 people, you knew everything by breakfast and forgot whatever was inconvenient by supper. Emma had $23 a satchel full of evidence that could shake the territorial land courts to their foundations, and nowhere to sleep past Friday. She sat down on the bench outside the telegraph office and did what she hadn't allowed herself to do inside Holt's office, or Mrs. Deering's hallway, or any of the 4 places she'd been quietly turned away from. She pressed her hands over her face and thought very hard about what to do next. She was still thinking when she heard boots stop in front of her. She lowered her hands. The man standing at the edge of the boardwalk was watching her with dark eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. He was lean in the way working men are lean, not thin, but built down to nothing extra, all of it useful. Dark brown hair under a worn hat. A jaw that looked like it had made a decision sometime in the past and never unmade it. She had seen him before. Once, maybe twice, at the land registry office. He was one of the ranchers who had been fighting a claim dispute. She couldn't remember his name, but she remembered that Victor Holt had mentioned it with the particular careful blankness he used when discussing things that irritated him. The man looked at her satchel, then at her face. "You're the bookkeeper," he said. "Emma Carter." "Was," she said. Something moved in his expression. Not sympathy exactly, more like recognition. "Cole Hayes," he said. He didn't offer his hand. "I own the Double H 12 miles north. I've had a land claim dispute running against Holt for going on 2 years. He paused. "Heard what happened this morning?" "Word travels fast." "In Redstone it does." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "What's in the bag?" Emma looked at him. "Evidence," she said. "Against Holt?" "Yes." He studied her for a long moment without speaking, the way a man studies a river. "He's thinking about crossing, not afraid of it, but honest about it." "Are you planning to use it?" "That was my intention," Emma said. "Though my circumstances have changed somewhat since this morning." Cole Hayes looked up the street, then back at her. "I've got a land hearing in the territorial court in Cheyenne," he said. 6 weeks from now. Holt filed a claim saying the Double H sits on a federal land grant he purchased in 1875. If that claim holds up, I lose everything my father built. He looked directly at her. "I've been fighting that claim with a lawyer who's good, but doesn't have what he needs to win it." Holt buried the paperwork too deep. Emma waited. "I think you might have what he needs," Cole said. "I might," Emma said carefully, "depending on what's in those files." "I'd need to know what's in them." "Then you'd need to hire me." "I'd need to do more than that," he said. His voice was even, completely even the way a man sounds when he's thought through a thing all the way to the end before he says it. Emma looked at him. "The territorial court in Cheyenne," Cole said, "gives significantly more weight to land claims held by established family households. Married men with wives managing a working domestic operation have stronger standing than single men in disputed cases. That's been the practice since '72. My lawyer told me that 6 months ago, and I didn't want to hear it." He paused. "I'm hearing it now." The silence between them was full of the sound of Redstone going about its afternoon. "You're asking me to pretend to be your wife," Emma said. "I'm asking you to come to the Double H," Cole said. "Help my lawyer build a case. Work the books if there's something in them that proves Holt's grant was fraudulent. And when we go to Cheyenne, present yourself as my wife." He looked at her steadily. 6 weeks. The hearing, then you're free to go wherever you're going with the rest of what you've got. I'll give you a fair wage for the bookkeeping, and you'll have a roof and 3 meals a day until this is over. Emma looked down at the satchel in her lap. $23. No room past Friday. A town that had closed every door against her in the span of 4 hours. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "what happens to you if you lose the hearing?" "I lose the ranch." "And if you win?" "I keep what my father built." Something tightened around his eyes. "And the 11 families Holt displaced to get to my land get their cases heard properly. My lawyer says a win in my case opens the door for the rest." Emma thought about Clara Halverson, 63 years old, and not reading English signing a paper she didn't understand. She thought about Hector Halverson's death record dated February 1878, and the deed Victor Holt had produced with Hector's signature from March of the same year. She thought about 11 families and $40 and the railroad survey maps she had memorized to the inch. "I need to be very clear about something," she said. "Go ahead." "What's in this satchel is evidence of federal land fraud on a significant scale. It's not just about your ranch, Mr. Hayes. If I share it with your lawyer, it doesn't stay contained to one hearing. This becomes a federal matter." "I know that. Holt will know it too. He'll come after both of us." "I expect so." "You're not troubled by that." "I'm plenty troubled by it," Cole said plainly. "But I'm more troubled by the alternative." He looked at her. "Are you?" Emma thought about standing in that alley with her hand against the wall. She thought about the way her hands had been shaking in the sheriff's office, and the way she had kept them still anyway, because some things mattered more than being afraid. "I have conditions," she said. Something shifted in Cole Hayes's expression, almost imperceptible but there. "Tell me," he said. "Separate quarters. This is a professional arrangement, not anything else." "Agreed. I want access to your full ranch ledgers from the past 5 years. If there's anything in them that helps build the case, I need to see all of it." "Agreed. My copies of Holt's documents go to your lawyer for safekeeping, not kept at the ranch where Holt's men can get at them." Already what I'd have suggested. "And when this is over, when the hearing is done, I leave with my evidence intact and the right to take it wherever I decide to take it next. You don't own what I've found. You have access to what's relevant to your case, and the rest is mine." Cole Hayes was quiet for a moment. "That's fair," he said. "One more thing," Emma said. "What's that?" "In public, at the hearing in town, wherever this arrangement requires us to be seen together, you follow my lead on what I'm comfortable with. I don't know you, Mr. Hayes. I don't know your temper or your habits or what kind of man you are away from a Main Street conversation. I need to know that what I say goes." He looked at her for a long moment. The wind moved down the street between them. "My father used to say," Cole said slowly, "that a man who can't take instruction from a woman with better information than him deserves everything he loses." He tilted his head slightly. "I reckon he was right about most things." It was not a declaration of anything. It was not warm or reassuring or designed to make her feel safe. But it was honest. And Emma Carter, who had spent 4 years working for a man who had mastered the art of saying things that sounded like honesty, recognized the difference immediately. She stood up from the bench. She picked up her satchel and held out her hand. 6 weeks, she said. "Then I go where I need to go." Cole Hayes looked at her hand. Then he shook it once firm and brief, the way men sealed things in the territory. 6 weeks, he said. "We leave at first light tomorrow." He walked away down the street without another word, and Emma stood there in the cold October wind, watching him go, her heart still hammering, and her mind already cataloging everything she would need to do before morning. Which room at which hotel would take a single woman's money without calling Victor Holt first? Which documents needed to be recopied and hidden in separate locations? What order to present the Halverson land, dates to produce the clearest possible proof of fraud in front of a territorial judge? She was frightened. She was also, for the first time since she had slapped that deed to the floor that morning, thinking clearly. That was enough. That was enough to start with. She turned and walked toward the far end of town, where the smaller hotel sat tucked behind the grain merchant, and did not look back at the sheriff's office, or at the front of Holt Land and Cattle, where the lights were already burning late in the windows, despite the early hour. Victor Holt was making telephone calls and writing letters and doing all the things powerful men do when they feel the ground shift under their feet. Emma Carter was making plans. Neither of them slept that night. But only one of them woke up the next morning with something worth fighting for, and 12 miles of open road ahead of her, and a man she didn't know yet, waiting at the edge of town with 2 horses, and not a single word of comfort to offer her. She didn't need comfort. She needed the double H ledgers and 6 weeks, and a judge who was still honest enough to listen. She had all 3 within reach. For now, that would have to be more than enough. The road to the Double H was 12 miles of hard-packed dirt that Cole Hayes rode in silence, and Emma Carter used every one of those miles to study the man she had just agreed to call her husband in front of a territorial judge. He didn't make small talk. He didn't check on her. He rode slightly ahead, not enough to be rude, just enough to make it clear that he wasn't the kind of man who filled silence with words he didn't mean. Emma respected that more than she expected to. She had spent 4 years listening to Victor Holt fill every room with the sound of his own certainty and silence she had decided was deeply underrated. What she noticed, Cole Hayes sat a horse the way men sit when they've done it since childhood, without thinking about it at all. His hands on the reins were still. His eyes moved constantly, fence line, tree line, horizon, the habit of a man who had learned a long time ago that trouble usually announced itself before it arrived, if you were paying attention. She noticed the rifle in the scabbard at his saddle. She noticed he rode on the side of her that faced the road back toward Redstone. She didn't say anything about either of those things. When the Double H came into view, Emma had been expecting something modest. A working ranch built by one man's hands over years of hard seasons. What she had not been expecting was the silence of it. Not the peaceful quiet of a prosperous property at the end of a morning, but the specific hollow quiet of a place that had once held more life than it currently did. A woman came out of the main house before they reached the gate. She was somewhere past 60, with gray-streaked hair pulled back hard and an expression that could have stopped a runaway team at 40 paces. "This her?" the woman said, looking at Emma the way a doctor looks at a wound he hasn't decided about yet. "Ruth, this is Emma Carter," Cole said, dismounting. "She'll be staying on until the Cheyenne hearing." "Staying on," Ruth repeated in the tone of a woman repeating a thing not because she didn't hear it, but because she wanted to make clear she had. "Yes, ma'am," Emma said from her horse. "I'm a bookkeeper. Mr. Hayes has engaged me to help build his land case." Ruth looked at Cole. "That's one way to describe it," Ruth said. Cole said, "She'll need the east room made up." "It's already made up," Ruth said flatly. "I made it up 2 days ago when you told me you were bringing someone back." She turned and walked back toward the house, and the particular angle of her spine communicated everything she had chosen not to say out loud. Cole watched her go. "She doesn't approve," Emma said. "Ruth doesn't approve of most things," Cole said. "Don't take it personally. She didn't approve of the weather last spring either." He took her horse's bridle. "She'll keep your room clean and your meals hot. That's all you need from her." Emma climbed down and pulled her satchel from the saddlebag, holding it against her chest out of reflex. "Has she been with the ranch long?" "Since I was 7, Cole said. "She was my father's housekeeper. She's been here longer than I have." He handed both horses off to a young ranch hand, who had materialized from the direction of the barn without being summoned the comfortable efficiency of a well-run operation. "Come inside. I want to show you the ledgers before the afternoon gets away from us." The ranch office was a room that smelled of tobacco and old paper and the specific staleness of accounts that hadn't been properly organized in years. Emma stood in front of the desk and looked at the stacked ledgers with the focused attention she usually reserved for first breakfasts and final courtroom testimony. "These go back how far?" she asked. "My father started keeping them in 1861, Cole said, "when he filed the original homestead claim." Emma pulled the oldest ledger toward her, opened it, and ran her finger down the first column of entries. Her eyes moved quickly. Cole watched her with his arms folded across his chest and said nothing which she appreciated. 3 minutes into the first ledger, she stopped. "Who is Thomas Carver?" she asked. Cole's jaw tightened slightly. "Why?" "Because your father made 11 payments to a Thomas Carver between 1863 and 1865, and they're listed under land security, which is not a standard accounting category. I've never seen that term in any ledger I've worked." She looked up. "Do you know what that means?" "I don't," Cole said. "My father handled his own books until I was old enough to take over. He never explained the early entries to me." "Thomas Carver," Emma said again more quietly, turning the name over. "Is that name in any of Holt's documents?" Cole went very still. "Say that again," he said. "The name Thomas Carver appears in 3 of Holt's falsified transfer records." Emma said slowly, opening her satchel and spreading her copied documents across the other half of the desk. "I didn't know what it meant in Holt's files, because it looked like a witness signature. But if your father was making payments to someone by that name for something called land security..." She stopped. "Who was he? A lawyer? A land agent?" "I don't know," Cole said, and then lower. "But I think my father might have." The silence in that room changed quality entirely. Emma looked at the ledger, then at Cole Hayes, and understood that the ground beneath this case was considerably less solid than either of them had walked in here assuming. "I need to go through all of these," she said. "Every year, every entry. How long will that take?" "If I work through dinner 3 days, maybe 2. She pulled the nearest chair to the desk and sat down. I'd like to start now. Cole looked at her for a moment, then nodded once, and left her to it. She worked until the light failed, and Ruth brought a plate to the door and set it on the hallway floor outside, without knocking, which Emma decided to interpret as a gesture of fundamental respect for concentration rather than anything else. By the time she stopped for the night, she had found 4 more entries referencing Thomas Carver. One entry that appeared to reference a boundary survey that had never been filed with the territorial registry, and one notation in her father's handwriting. Tight. Careful, the hand of a man choosing his words precisely. That read simply, HLCT knows. Keep quiet. HLCT Holt. Land and Cattle Trust. The trust Victor Holt had incorporated in 1874. The year before, he had supposedly purchased the federal land grant that now threatened the Double H. Emma sat alone in the ranch office with that notation in front of her and felt the specific chill that comes not from cold air, but from understanding something you cannot unknow. Cole Hayes's father had known Victor Holt was coming for this land. He had known it before Holt had even filed the claim. And he had told no one. She was still sitting with that thought the next morning when the sound of an unfamiliar horse in the yard pulled her to the window. The man who dismounted wore a good coat and town boots, unsuited for ranch work. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm. He had the particular bearing of a man who delivered messages that other men had written for him, useful, careful, not responsible for the content. Emma was already at the office door when Cole came in from the barn. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. "Frank Dole," Cole said, and his voice had gone flat in a way she hadn't heard from him before. "Holt's man. He handles property negotiations." His eyes moved to her. "He's been here twice before." "What does he want?" "Same thing he wanted the other 2 times, Cole said. "To offer me money to walk away." Frank Dole came to the door and removed his hat with the practiced courtesy of a man who had learned that manner was armor. Ruth led him into the front room without a word. Cole and Emma came in from the hallway, and Dole's eyes moved to Emma with the brief assessing flicker of a man recalibrating a situation. "Mr. Hayes," Dole said, extending his hand. "I wasn't aware you had company." "My wife," Cole said. He said it without hesitation, without inflection, with the absolute flatness of a man stating a fact he had lived with for years. Emma felt it land in the room like a stone into still water. She met Frank Dole's handshake with a firm grip and a level look. "Emma Hayes," she said. "Can we help you, Mr. Dole?" Dole opened his portfolio with the slightly too smooth movement of a man who had been thrown off his script. "I was here to discuss Mr. Holt's standing offer regarding the Double H land dispute. Given the upcoming Cheyenne hearing, Mr. Holt is prepared to—" "Double it," Emma said. Dole blinked. "I beg your pardon. Whatever the offer was before he's doubled it," Emma said. "That's why you're here now and not 6 months ago. The hearing date is set and he's worried." She looked at him pleasantly. "What is it now, 8010? Dole said nothing, which was itself an answer. "We're not interested," Emma said. "You can tell Mr. Holt that the Hayes family will see him in Cheyenne." There was a beat of absolute silence. Cole said nothing. His expression said nothing. He was watching Emma with those dark eyes and the same quality of attention he'd had on the road out of Redstone, still measuring honest. Dole closed his portfolio. He looked at Cole, directly bypassing Emma, in the deliberate way men do when they want to suggest that a woman's words don't entirely count. "Mr. Hayes, this offer expires when the hearing opens. After that, whatever the court decides is what you're left with." "We understand the terms," Cole said. "My wife gave you our answer." Dole put his hat back on. He nodded once, the tight, compressed nod of a man who would be reporting a development his employer would not want to hear, and walked back out to his horse. Emma waited until the sound of hooves faded down the road. Then she let out a long, slow breath she had been holding since the moment she'd said the word double. 10,000, Cole said beside her. "Pardon, the offer." He looked at her sideways. "It was 10,000. You were right. People like Holt always double it when the clock starts running, Emma said. They think money is the only argument. She paused. It usually is. Not always, Cole said quietly. She looked at him. He was looking out the front window at the road where Dole had disappeared, and something in his face had changed from the careful blankness he kept as his default, not soft exactly, but open at the edges, in a way that made him look closer to his actual age. That's the first time, he said, in 2 years that anyone has been in that room with me when Dole came. Emma didn't say anything. It felt different, Cole said. Simply, like reporting a fact. Different how? He thought about it for a moment. Like the ground was more solid under me. He turned back toward the hallway, and the openness closed up again as efficiently as a shutter. I'll let you get back to the ledgers. He was 3 steps down the hall when Emma said, Cole. He stopped. Your father's ledger, she said. The notation that references Holt's trust, he wrote it in 1874. The year before Holt filed the federal grant claim. That means your father was warned that Holt was coming for this land before Holt made a single official move. She held his gaze. Someone told him, which means someone on Holt's side broke with Holt at least once, at least far enough to warn your father. Cole Hayes stood very still in the hallway. Thomas Carver, he said. I think so, Emma said. And if Carver warned your father and then signed Holt's transfer documents, either he was coerced or he changed sides again. She pressed her hand flat against the ledger cover. Either way, he's the thread that connects your father's claim and Holt's fraud directly. If we can find Thomas Carver, he's dead, Cole said. He died in the winter of 1876. I know that name. He was a land surveyor. He worked this county for 20 years. He paused. He died 2 months after Holt filed the federal grant claim. The silence stretched between them. That's not a coincidence, Emma said. No, Cole said. It is not. He stood in the hallway and looked at her across the length of the room, and Emma understood in that moment that the case she had walked into the Double H carrying was not the case she actually had. What she had in her satchel was the edge of something much larger, much older, and considerably more dangerous than one corrupt land speculator cheating 11 homestead families. I need to write to my lawyer tonight, Cole said. He needs to know about Carver. Write the letter, Emma said, but don't send it through Redstone. Cole looked at her sharply. Holt has the telegraph operator, Emma said, and probably the mail rider. If he knows I'm here, and after today he does, he'll have someone watching the outgoing correspondence. She thought quickly. Is there a rider you trust? Absolutely. Someone with no connection to town, too. My foreman, Cole said. Eli's been with me 8 years. He has family in Laramie. He can carry a letter south and post it from there. Then write it tonight, Emma said. And add this. She crossed to the desk and picked up a pen, wrote 4 lines of cramped notation on a piece of paper, and held it out to him. Those are the parcel numbers and the Carver payment dates from your father's ledger. Your lawyer will know what to do with them. Cole took the paper. He read it. He looked at her. You memorized the ledger entries, he said. I memorize everything, Emma said. It's what I do. He stood there holding the paper with the expression of a man revising an estimate upward without quite having the words for it yet. Then Ruth appeared at the end of the hall and said without preamble, Supper's on the table, both of you, before it goes cold, in the tone of a woman who has watched enough men stand in hallways being significant when they could be eating and has run out of patience with the practice. Cole folded the paper into his coat pocket. Emma picked up the ledger. They walked toward the dining room in the particular silence of 2 people who have just understood that they are no longer playing the game they thought they sat down to, and that the stakes, which had already been high, have just quietly, irrevocably doubled. Neither of them said it out loud over supper, but Ruth looked between them once, pressed her lips together, and refilled Cole's coffee without being asked, which Emma would later learn was the closest thing Ruth Deering ever offered to the word careful. 3 days into the ledgers, Emma found the letter. It was tucked behind the back cover of the 1874 volume, folded into quarters and pressed flat by years of weight. Thin paper gone yellow at the edges. The ink faded but legible to someone who had trained herself to read what other people thought couldn't be read anymore. Emma pulled it out with the careful fingers she used for all documents she couldn't replace, unfolded it on the desk, and read it twice before she breathed. It was addressed to James Cole Hayes, Cole's father, and it was signed T. Carver, November 14th, 1874. James, I cannot put this in any official record. What Holt has built is not a land claim. It is a structure years in the making, reaching from this county to Cheyenne, and further than that. The federal grant document he holds is not legitimate. I surveyed that parcel myself in 1869, and I know what the federal record shows. What Holt holds is not the same document. Someone altered it. Someone with access to the Territorial Land Office. I don't know who yet. I am trying to find out. Do not sell. Do not negotiate. Do not trust the sheriff. Keep this letter where no one will look for it. If something happens to me before I can bring this forward, give it to a federal man. Only federal. T.C. Emma sat very still for a long moment. Then she got up, walked to Cole's door at the end of the hall, and knocked. He opened it almost immediately, which told her he hadn't been sleeping either. She held out the letter without a word. He read it standing in the doorway. She watched his face move through several things in rapid succession: recognition, grief, fury, and finally something that settled into a kind of cold, clear purpose that she was beginning to understand was what Cole Hayes looked like when he had made a decision he wasn't going to revisit. He knew, Cole said. He had this, and he never. He was protecting you, Emma said. If you'd known, you'd have gone after Holt years ago. You'd have gone alone without evidence, without a lawyer, and Holt would have crushed you before you got started. She paused. Your father knew what Carver was telling him. He was waiting until he had enough. He died before he had enough, Cole said. Yes, Emma said. He did. Cole stood in that doorway holding his father's letter and said nothing for long enough that Emma was about to tell him she'd leave him alone with it. Then he said very quietly, Carver was right, about all of it. The federal grant document, Emma said. If it was altered, there will be a record of what the original said. Federal land records have duplicate filings in Washington. We need to get word to your lawyer tonight. He needs to request the Washington copy of that grant before Holt finds out we're looking for it. Cole looked up from the letter. Eli's not back yet from Laramie. When do you expect him? Tomorrow morning. Maybe tonight if he pushed the ride. He folded the letter with the same careful precision Emma used for her documents and held it back toward her. You keep it, with the others. It's yours, Emma said. It's evidence, he said. You're better with evidence than I am. Keep it. She took it. She was turning back toward the office when he said her name, not Miss Carter, not the careful formality he had maintained since Redstone, just Emma, and she stopped. Thank you, he said, for finding it. I was just doing the books, she said. No, Cole said. You weren't. She went back to the office. She didn't sleep. Eli arrived at dawn with hard eyes and a jaw set, like a man carrying news he'd rather not deliver. He came into the kitchen while Ruth was putting coffee on, and Emma and Cole were already at the table, and he stood in the doorway for a moment looking between them with the expression of a man deciding how much of a thing to say at once. Lawyer got the letter, Eli said. He's already filed for the Washington land record. Says it'll take 2 weeks minimum to get back. He pulled off his hat and turned it in his hands. That ain't the part I'm worried about. Cole said, tell me. Holt knows she's here, Eli said, nodding toward Emma. And he knows about the ledgers. Don't ask me how, because I don't know. But his man Dole was at the Laramie Telegraph office when I posted the letter. Could have seen my name on it. Could have been someone from the ranch talking. His eyes moved across the room and didn't settle on anyone in particular, but Emma noticed he didn't quite look at young Billy, the hand who'd taken their horses the first morning. Either way, Holt knows. How long have we got before he moves? Cole asked. I'd say you've already got maybe a day, Eli said. He's filed something with Pruitt. I don't know what yet, but Dole wasn't in Laramie just to watch me post a letter. He was sending wires. Ruth set coffee cups down on the table with a firmness that was her version of punctuation. Cole looked at Emma. Emma was already thinking. She turned the letter over in her mind, the ledger entries, the parcel numbers, the falsified dates, the Thomas Carver payment records, and the one thread she hadn't yet been able to trace to its end. The person inside the Territorial Land Office who had altered the federal grant document. Someone with access. Someone Holt trusted completely. He's going to try to freeze the ranch before the hearing, Emma said. Some kind of injunction. If he can get Pruitt to serve papers claiming the land is already under federal dispute proceedings, he can legally block you from selling assets or making any land-related decisions until after the hearing. It's a pressure move. He wants you to run out of resources before Cheyenne. Can he do that? Eli asked. With Pruitt in his pocket, yes, Emma said. Unless we establish a public record of our own right now, that's harder to challenge. She looked at Cole. Does Redstone have a town notary? Abner Marsh, Cole said. He's as straight as they come. Holt's never been able to get to him. We need to get every document I have, every copy, every original Carver's letter, the ledger entries notarized and witnessed before Pruitt shows up with whatever Holt has sent him. She pushed back from the table. Today, this morning. Cole stood up at the same time she did. Eli, he said, saddle 2 horses. They rode into Redstone with the satchel, and the weight of Thomas Carver's dead knowledge between them and Emma kept her eyes on the road and her hand pressed flat against the satchel buckle, the way she'd kept her hands still in the sheriff's office 6 days ago. Not because it helped anything, but because stillness was the only thing she had that was entirely her own. Abner Marsh's notary office was a narrow room wedged between the barber and the post office, and Abner himself was a small, precise man of 70, who had been notarizing documents in Redstone since before Cole was born, and who responded to Emma's rapid technical explanation of what she needed with the focused calm of a man who had seen most things and found paperwork the most reliable response to all of them. How many documents? He asked. 19, Emma said. Sit down, he said. This will take an hour. They were 40 minutes into the process, Abner's stamp coming down in steady rhythm, Cole signing as witness, Emma signing as originating party, when the door opened. Victor Holt walked in. Not Dole, not Pruitt. Victor Holt himself in a good coat with his pale eyes and his particular quality of stillness. And he looked at Emma across the narrow room the way he had looked at her in the sheriff's office. And she felt the same thing she'd felt then, cold and furious at herself for feeling cold and determined not to show either. Emma, he said pleasantly, I thought that was your horse outside. Mr. Holt, she said. He looked at Cole. Hayes. Then at the documents spread across Marsh's desk. That's quite a stack of paperwork. Keep going, Abner, Cole said quietly, without looking away from Holt. Marsh's stamp came down again. Holt clasped his hands behind his back and smiled the slow, cold smile Emma remembered. You know, I came into town today to speak with Sheriff Pruitt about some troubling information that's come to my attention. One of my former employees, a clerk in my records department, has told me that certain documents in my land files were tampered with. Dates altered. Entries changed. He tilted his head. He says he saw who did it. Emma's heart rate did not change. She had practiced this, keeping the inside of herself from showing on the outside for 4 years in Victor Holt's employment, and she was very good at it. That's a serious allegation, she said. It is, Holt agreed, particularly given that the person he identified was my own bookkeeper. His eyes settled on her face. A woman with access to every record I kept. A woman I trusted completely. He paused. A woman who apparently decided that trust was something she could put in her bag and walk out the door with. Marsh's stamp came down, and down again. You can make that allegation in Cheyenne, Emma said, in front of a federal judge, with your witness on the stand where my lawyer can question him. I intend to, Holt said. I also intend to make sure the court understands exactly what kind of woman has been advising Cole Hayes. He let that sit for a moment. An unmarried woman of uncertain reputation, living alone on a man's property, handling his private financial records. She is not unmarried, Cole said. His voice was very flat, the way a plank is flat when it has been nailed down. Holt looked at him. Emma is my wife, Cole said. Has been for 2 months. We were married in Denver before we came back to the Double H. You're welcome to check the county record in Arapahoe. He held Holt's gaze. And I would think very carefully before you finish whatever you were about to say about her. Holt studied Cole for 3 full seconds. Then he looked at Emma with a different quality of attention, recalculating the way he had always recalculated, fast and invisible, and only visible to someone who knew what to look for in his pale eyes. Emma looked back at him and said nothing. She did not reach for Cole's hand, or move closer to him, or perform any version of the wifely reassurance that the moment might have called for. She simply held Holt's gaze the way she had held it in the sheriff's office, steady level, and perfectly aware of exactly what evidence she had in the bag beside her. Holt smiled again, smaller this time. Congratulations, he said. I wasn't aware. He glanced at Marsh's desk. Finish your paperwork, Emma. It won't change anything. He turned toward the door. See you in Cheyenne. The door closed behind him. Marsh's stamp came down. Cole let out a breath through his nose that was the only concession to the last 4 minutes he would apparently allow himself. Arapahoe County, Emma said quietly. There is a marriage record in Arapahoe County, Cole said. I filed it last week, before I came to Redstone to find you. He looked at her. I needed the record to exist before Dole came to the ranch. I took a chance on whether you'd agree. Emma stared at him. You filed a marriage record before you even spoke to me, she said. I'd watched you for 3 weeks, Cole said. Before you ever walked into Pruitt's office. I watched the way you worked, the way you handled yourself, the questions you were asking in the land registry. He was looking straight ahead at the wall now, his jaw set. I knew what you were doing. I knew what you were finding. And I knew Holt was going to move against you before you were ready. He paused. So I made a decision. Without asking me, Emma said. I asked you on the bench outside the telegraph office, Cole said. You said yes. I said yes to 6 weeks, Emma said. And I told you 6 weeks, he said. I haven't changed any of the terms. The record exists to protect both of us legally. Nothing else changes. He finally looked at her. I should have told you. That was wrong. I'm telling you now. The notary stamp came down for the last time. Done, Marsh said, with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had just put 19 documents beyond anyone's ability to challenge. Emma looked at the stack of papers. Then she looked at Cole Hayes, this man she had known for 6 days, who had filed a marriage record for her before she had agreed to anything, who had said "my wife" to Victor Holt's face without flinching, who had stood in a hallway 3 nights ago and told her the ground felt more solid when she was in the room, and she understood that the thing she was most afraid of right now was not Victor Holt, and not the hearing in Cheyenne, and not whatever witness Holt had coached to testify against her. What she was most afraid of was the way her chest had felt when Cole said, "She is my wife," in that flat, final, nailed-down voice. Like something she had been carrying for a very long time had briefly, impossibly been set down. She picked up the satchel. Let's go back to the ranch, she said. I need to finish the ledgers. Cole paid Marsh, took the notarized copies, and held the door open for her without being asked. They rode out of Redstone side by side, and this time he didn't ride slightly ahead. He rode even with her. Exactly even the whole 12 miles back. Neither of them mentioned it. But Emma felt it the entire way, that precise, deliberate evenness, and it unsettled her in a way that 100 of Victor Holt's pale-eyed smiles never had. Because Victor Holt had always wanted something from her. She was not yet certain what Cole Hayes wanted. She was becoming increasingly uncertain that he wanted nothing at all. That night, Ruth knocked on the office door properly for the first time. She didn't come in. She stood in the doorway with her arms folded and looked at Emma with the expression that Emma had spent days reading as hostility and was now abruptly not certain about at all. You know what Thomas Carver died of? Ruth said. Emma looked up. Officially, it was a fall from a horse, Ruth said, in February of 1876. She pressed her lips together. Thomas Carver had been riding horses on this land for 20 years. He didn't fall. She looked at Emma steadily. James Cole's father, he knew. And it's the reason he made Cole leave for Denver for 2 years after. To keep him away from here until he figured out how to fight it. Her chin moved slightly. He never did figure it out. And then he was gone too. The silence in the office was absolute. James Hayes died of a heart attack, Emma said slowly. That's what the doctor wrote down, Ruth said. She unfolded her arms, turned and walked back down the hall. Emma sat alone with Thomas Carver's letter in front of her and understood finally and completely that this case was not about land. It never had been. Emma did not sleep that night. She sat in the ranch office with Ruth's words sitting in the air around her like smoke that wouldn't clear. And she went through everything she knew. Again from the beginning. Thomas Carver, the altered federal grant, the payments in the ledger, the notation in James Hayes's handwriting, the letter hidden behind the book cover, and when she laid it all end to end in the right order, the shape of it was not the shape of land fraud. It was the shape of something that had required 2 men to be dead before it could proceed. She found Cole in the barn before sunrise. He was working on a piece of harness leather that didn't need working on, which was what he did. She had learned when he was thinking about something he didn't have words for yet. She told him what Ruth had said. He didn't stop working on the leather for the first several seconds. His hands kept moving, pull smooth pull. And Emma watched his jaw set and release and set again. Then he put the harness down. I know, he said. Emma waited. I was 19 when my father died, Cole said. The doctor said heart failure. Happened in his sleep, no warning. Nothing unusual. He turned the harness over in his hands without looking at it. My father was 51 years old. He'd worked this land since he was 30. He was the strongest man I knew. He paused. I told myself the doctor was right. For years I told myself that, because if I didn't, I'd have to... He stopped. You'd have to do something about it alone, Emma said. And I would have lost, Cole said. Same as Carver. The barn was quiet around them. Outside, the first gray light was starting at the edges of the sky. You're not alone now, Emma said. He looked at her then, directly the way he rarely allowed himself, none of the careful management of his expression, none of the shuttered quality that kept his face at a professional distance. Just the actual face of Cole Hayes, which was younger than he made it seem, and considerably more tired. No, he said. I reckon I'm not. He picked up the harness again. Emma turned back toward the house. She was 3 steps out of the barn when he called after her. Emma. His voice was rough at the edge. Whatever happens in Cheyenne, whatever the court decides, I need you to know that this ranch is not worth more to me than... He stopped, started again. I want Holt to answer for what he did to my father. That's what I want. The land is... Another stop. The land is what I'm fighting with. It's not what I'm fighting for. Emma stood with her back to him for a moment. I know, she said quietly. I've known since the ledgers. She went back inside. 3 days later, Eli found the young ranch hand Billy in the grain store with a folded piece of paper in his shirt pocket and guilt on his face like a brand. The paper was a report addressed to Frank Dole, written in Billy's cramped hand, listing dates and times and the contents of conversations he'd overheard in the ranch house over the previous week. Cole read it at the kitchen table without expression. Then he folded it exactly as Billy had folded it and put it in his own pocket. How much was he paying you? Cole asked. Billy was 17 and could not hold up under a direct question from a man he respected. He lasted 4 seconds. $1 a week, he said. I needed my mother needed. I know what your mother needs, Cole said. I've known your family for 6 years. He stood up. Pack your things. Eli will take you to your mother's house in town. I'll make sure she has enough to get through the winter. He looked at Billy steadily. And you'll tell me everything you told Dole, right now, before you leave, every word. Billy told him. Holt knew about the Washington land record request. He knew about Thomas Carver's letter. He knew about the notarized documents. He did not yet know the full contents of Emma's copies from his own files, but he knew she had them, and he knew she had been cross-referencing them with the Double H ledgers, which meant he had approximately 2 weeks to destroy the case before the Cheyenne hearing, and he now knew exactly how much he needed to destroy. "He'll move soon," Emma said when Cole told her, "before we can leave for Cheyenne." "He'll move tonight," Cole said. "Now that Billy's gone and Holt knows we've found the leak, there's no reason to wait." Emma looked at him. "You're sure?" "I would be," Cole said. "In his position." He was right. They came at 2 in the morning. 3 men on horses without lamps, quiet, the way men are quiet when they're being paid to be. Eli heard them first 20 yards from the main house and got Cole up with a single knock on the doorframe that brought Cole to his feet and to the rifle in 4 seconds flat. Emma was already in the hallway with her satchel. Cole looked at her. "Get to the root cellar. Take the documents." "I'm not going to the root cellar," Emma said. "Emma, I'm not going to the root cellar," she said again in the voice she had used to tell Victor Holt she could prove it, the voice that did not negotiate. "What do you need me to do?" A beat of silence. A muscle in his jaw. "Stay in the hall," he said. "Away from windows. If anyone gets through the front door, who isn't me or Eli, you go out the kitchen window and you run toward the south pasture fence. Don't stop." "Understood," she said. He went out the back. What followed was 11 minutes that Emma spent in the dark hallway with her back against the wall, and her satchel in her arms, listening to the sounds. Outside voices raised briefly. A horse startled something that might have been a scuffle, or might have been 2 men running and doing the thing she had learned to do in Victor Holt's office when things went wrong, which was to think instead of feel organize, instead of panic. Keep the inside of herself in its proper order, while everything outside it did whatever it was going to do. She did not do it particularly well this time. When Cole came back through the front door 12 minutes later, with a cut along his jaw and his shirt pulled loose at the collar, Emma covered the distance between them before she had consciously decided to move. She stopped herself 1 step short. She pressed her free hand flat against her own sternum and made herself breathe. "Are you hurt?" she said. "I'm fine." He touched his jaw. "Glass from a window. Eli's got a bruised hand. The other 3 are riding back to Redstone a good deal less confident than they arrived." He looked at her hand pressed against her chest, and something moved in his expression that she couldn't catalog. "You stayed. You told me to stay in the hall. I told you to run if they got through the door." "They didn't get through the door," Emma said. He stood there looking at her in the particular way he had looked at her in the notary's office, like he was revising something upward, and the revision kept coming out bigger than the previous one. "You were scared," he said. "Yes," she said. "But you stayed anyway." "Yes." She looked at him levelly. "I generally do." He reached up and touched the cut on his jaw again. Then, almost without seeming to decide to, he reached out and took the satchel from her arms. Not sharply, just quietly with both hands, taking the weight of it. She let him. Her arm was more tired than she had realized from holding it. He set it on the hall table. He kept his hands on the strap for a moment. Then he let go, stepped back and said, "We leave for Cheyenne at first light, 4 days early, before he can regroup." His voice was professional, again level and organized. "Pack only what you need for the hearing. Eli will ride escort the first day." "All right," Emma said. She picked up the satchel from the table and went back to the office. She sat down in the chair and put her hands flat on the desk and stared at them until they stopped their faint, private trembling. Cheyenne in October was all wind and gray sky and the particular energy of a territorial capital that knew it mattered. Wide streets, stone buildings, the federal courthouse standing at the end of the main avenue, with the kind of architectural confidence that was meant to remind everyone who walked through its doors that the law was a permanent thing, and whatever they were bringing inside it had better be solid. Emma had been to Cheyenne once before 3 years ago on a filing errand for Holt. She had stood outside this courthouse then and thought someday, She had not specified what she meant by that. She was specifying it now. Cole's lawyer was a lean man named August Reeves, who met them at the hotel the evening before the hearing with a stack of telegrams and the focused energy of a man who had been sleeping 4 hours a night for a week. He shook Emma's hand with both of his and said, "Mrs. Hayes, I have been waiting for those ledger entries since the day Cole first walked into my office," which was the most professional compliment Emma had ever received and landed with more weight than he probably intended. "The Washington Record," Emma asked immediately, "arrived this morning." Reeves opened his case and laid a document on the table between them. "Exactly as you predicted. The original federal grant for the contested parcel was filed in 1869, surveyed by Thomas Carver, and describes boundaries that do not match the document Holt has entered as evidence." He tapped the Washington copy. "Two of the boundary markers are transposed. The parcel described in Holt's document is approximately 40 acres larger than the actual federal grant." Emma looked at Cole. "Carver was right," Cole said for the second time. "There's one more thing," Reeves said. He spread his hands flat on the table in the careful way of a man about to say something he needs the other person to hear completely. "Holt has filed his witness list. The man who will testify that you tampered with his land documents, Emma, his name is Marcus Carver." The room went very quiet. "Carver," Emma said. "Thomas Carver's son," Reeves confirmed. "He's been employed as a records clerk in Holt's land office for 4 years. Holt has apparently coached him to testify that he personally witnessed you altering dates in the Holt land files on at least 3 separate occasions." He looked at Emma. "He's prepared to swear to it." Emma set her hands flat on the table. Thomas Carver had died in February of 1876. His son would have been, she calculated quickly, young. Perhaps 12, 13 years old. Grown now into a young man working for the same organization that had in all probability arranged his father's death. Working for them because he had no other choice. Because they had made sure of it. "He's not going to lie for them," Emma said. Reeves looked at her sharply. "You don't know that. He's Thomas Carver's son," Emma said. "His father died trying to expose what Holt built, and Holt took that boy in afterward and employed him and kept him close, where he could be used and controlled, and where he could never speak about what happened to his father without putting himself at risk." She looked at Reeves steadily. "That is not a man who wants to testify against me. That is a man who has been told he has no choice." Cole was watching her. "You want to talk to him," Cole said. "Before the hearing starts tomorrow," Emma said. "Before he goes on the stand and says words he can't take back." She looked at Reeves. "Can you get him into a room with me officially through you so it's proper and recorded?" Reeves thought for a long moment. "I can request a pre-testimony meeting on procedural grounds," he said slowly. "It's irregular, but not prohibited." He studied her. "What are you going to say to him?" "I'm going to tell him the truth," Emma said. "About his father, about the letter, about what Thomas Carver tried to do and what it cost him." She picked up the satchel. "And then I'm going to let him decide what kind of man he wants to be." The silence in the hotel room was the kind that comes before things that cannot be undone. Cole looked at Emma with the same expression she had come to know best on him. Not warm, not distant, but something precise and private that lived in the space between those two things, and that she had stopped trying to name about a week ago, because naming it felt like something she didn't have the right to do yet. "All right," Reeves said finally. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, before the court opens." He began packing his case. "I'll arrange it." He left. Cole walked him to the door and came back and stood in the middle of the hotel room and looked at Emma in the lamplight. "If he testifies against you anyway," Cole said, "the case still holds. The Washington Record alone." "It's not about the case," Emma said. Cole stopped. "Marcus Carver has been living inside the machine that killed his father," Emma said, "for years. Doing what they told him, saying what they told him, because no one ever showed him there was another way." She looked up at Cole. "I know what that feels like. Knowing something is wrong and staying quiet Because you've decided the cost of speaking is too high. She paused. Someone has to show him the cost of staying quiet is higher. Cole Hayes stood in the lamplight of a Cheyenne hotel room and looked at Emma Carter with something on his face that he made no effort at all to manage or contain. "Emma," he said. "Don't," she said quietly. Not unkindly, just firmly, the way she did most things. He closed his mouth. She blew out the lamp on the table between them and said goodnight and went to her room and lay in the dark with tomorrow arranged in her mind in careful order, and her heart doing something entirely disorganized that she chose for now to simply observe without acting on it. Marcus Carver's meeting was set for 8 o'clock in the morning. The hearing opened at 9. Emma had 1 hour to give a young man back his father's courage, and she intended to use every minute of it. Marcus Carver was 23 years old and looked younger the way people look younger when they've been carrying a weight that's too heavy for them, and it shows in the set of their shoulders rather than on their face. He came into the small anteroom off the courthouse lobby at exactly 8 o'clock, which told Emma he was punctual, and he sat down across from her without speaking first, which told her he was either very controlled or very afraid. Given everything she now knew about his situation, she suspected both. Reeves sat in the corner and said nothing. This was Emma had told him before Marcus arrived her conversation. She put Thomas Carver's letter on the table between them. Marcus looked at it. He didn't touch it. "Do you recognize the handwriting?" Emma asked. He said nothing for a moment. Then very quietly, "That's my father's hand." "Yes," Emma said. "I found it in James Hayes's ledger 3 weeks ago, hidden behind the back cover." She kept her voice even, the same voice she used for numbers and dates and documented facts. "Your father wrote it to James Hayes in November of 1874, 2 months before your father died." Marcus still hadn't touched the letter. His hands were flat on his thighs and his jaw was tight. "Read it," Emma said gently. He read it. She watched his face while he did not to observe him, but because she felt it was owed someone should witness this the moment a young man found out who his father had actually been. When he finished, he put the letter back on the table and pressed both hands over his face for a moment. "He knew," Marcus said. "He knew what Holt was doing. He knew for months before he died," Emma said. "He was trying to find the proof. He found enough to warn James Hayes, but he didn't get far enough before—" She stopped and let him fill in the rest himself. Marcus lowered his hands. His eyes were red at the edges, but dry. "He told me he fell from a horse," Marcus said. "I was 12. That's what they told me. Holt sent men to our house 2 weeks after very kind, very sorry offering my mother money and offering me a position in his office when I was old enough." He let out a breath that was thin and ragged. "I thought he was being charitable. He was keeping you where he could see you," Emma said. "Where you couldn't ask questions without putting yourself in the line of sight of the man who—" She stopped again. Marcus looked at her directly for the first time since he'd sat down. "Who killed him?" Marcus said. Emma held his gaze. "I can't prove that part yet, not in this room today, but yes, I believe so." The silence in the anteroom was complete. "What you're being asked to testify to today," Emma said carefully, "is not the truth. You know that." "I know that," Marcus said. "And you've agreed to say it anyway because Holt has made you believe you have no choice," Emma said. "Because you've worked inside his operation for 4 years, and you know too much about what he does to people who stop being useful." She leaned forward slightly. "But Marcus, if you take that stand today and say what he's coached you to say, you will spend the rest of your life knowing that you helped the man who killed your father destroy the woman who found the proof he tried to leave behind." She paused. "I don't think you want that." Marcus Carver sat across from her and breathed. The clock on the courthouse wall moved from 8:12 to 8:13. "If I change my testimony," he said slowly, "Holt will." "Holt is going to be arrested today," Emma said. "Regardless of what you do on that stand, the Washington land record alone is enough to void his federal grant claim. The Carver letter and the ledger entries are enough to open a federal fraud investigation. What your testimony changes is not the outcome of the hearing. She looked at him steadily. What it changes is you. August Reeves stirred in the corner. He looked at his watch. We have 15 minutes, he said. Marcus Carver looked down at his father's letter on the table between them. He reached out and touched the corner of it, not picking it up, just touching it, the way you touch something you can't quite believe is real. Can I keep it? He asked. It belongs to you, Emma said. He folded it carefully, put it in his breast pocket. Then he sat up straight in his chair in a way that changed his entire bearing, and Emma recognized the movement she had made it herself in a sheriff's office in Redstone, Wyoming, standing in front of Victor Holt, with shaking hands, deciding to say the thing out loud. Tell me, Marcus said, exactly what you need me to say. The territorial courtroom was packed by the time the judge called order at 9 o'clock sharp. Ranchers, land agents, townspeople who had ridden in from 3 counties, knowing that the Hayes case had become something larger than one man's boundary dispute. Emma sat beside Cole at the respondent's table, with her satchel and her notarized copies and the Washington land record that Reeves had filed with the court at 7:45 that morning, and she looked straight ahead at the bench and kept her breathing even. Cole leaned close and said very quietly, "How did it go?" "We'll see," Emma said. He straightened. She felt him make the decision not to push further, which was one of the things she had come to rely on about him without quite realizing it was happening. Holt sat at the opposing table in an excellent coat with 2 lawyers, and a confidence that Emma recognized as genuine. He believed he had this. He had the political connections, the coached witness, the superior resources, and the 20-year habit of winning in rooms exactly like this one. He looked at Emma once when he came in. She looked back. Neither of them looked away first. After 4 seconds, Holt simply redirected his attention elsewhere, which was its own kind of answer. Reeves opened for the respondent with the Washington land record, presenting it to the bench with the precise, unhurried manner of a man who knows his best evidence and trusts it completely. The judge, a federal appointee named Harlan Cross, who had the reputation of a man who read everything put in front of him twice before forming an opinion, studied the document for 4 full minutes before setting it down. Holt's lead attorney rose immediately. "Your Honor, the respondent's counsel is presenting an uncertified copy." "It is a certified copy from the Federal Land Office in Washington," Reeves said. "Certification is on page 3. I would also note that the chain of custody is documented from the Washington office directly to this court, with no intermediate handling by any party to this proceeding." Cross-examined, page 3. "Proceed," he said. Holt's attorney presented their case for 40 minutes. The land grant document, the purchase record, the claim of continuous ownership. He was good. Emma had to acknowledge it. The argument was structured clearly and delivered confidently, and if you didn't know what she knew about the boundary discrepancy and the date of the original survey, it sounded entirely reasonable. Then Reeves rose to cross-examine and walked Holt's lead attorney through the boundary markers, line by line, comparing the Holt document against the Washington record with the methodical precision of a man who had spent 3 weeks preparing for exactly this. By the time he sat down, 2 of the 4 boundary markers had been demonstrated in open court to describe different locations in the 2 documents. Cross made a note and said, "The court will take a brief recess." During the recess, Holt crossed the floor to where Cole and Emma sat. Cole stood up. He didn't say anything. He just stood. Holt looked at Emma. His pale eyes were still calculating, but something behind them had shifted, not fear exactly, but the specific quality of a man who has recognized that the ground is less solid than he mapped it. "This doesn't end the way you think it does," Holt said quietly. "No," Emma agreed. "It ends worse than you think it does." Holt held her gaze for a moment. Then he turned and walked back to his table, and Emma sat back down, and Cole sat down beside her, and said nothing at all, which was exactly right. Marcus Carver was called to the stand at 11:15. Holt's attorney led him through the opening questions, with the confidence of a man who had rehearsed this conversation carefully, name, position, years of employment relationship to the documents in question. Marcus answered evenly, his voice steady, his hands on the railing in front of him, without gripping it. Then the attorney asked him to describe what he had witnessed regarding the alteration of land documents. Marcus looked out across the courtroom. His eyes found Emma at the respondent's table. She gave him nothing. No nod, no encouragement, no signal. This had to be entirely his. She had told him that before they walked in. "I did not witness any alteration of documents by Emma Carter," Marcus said. The courtroom changed temperature. Holt's attorney said, "Mr. Carver, you provided a sworn statement that—" "I provided a statement that Mr. Holt's office prepared for me to sign," Marcus said. "The content of that statement was not based on anything I personally witnessed. I signed it because I was told I had no choice." His voice did not waver. That was a lie, and so was the statement. The eruption in the courtroom was immediate. Judge Cross brought his gavel down 3 times before the noise dropped below usable. Holt's attorney was on his feet. Holt himself had gone very still at his table, the particular stillness Emma knew better than any other quality of his, the snake stillness before the strike. But there was nowhere left to strike. Marcus Carver spent 40 minutes on that stand telling the truth about what Holt's office had done with the boundary records, about the pressure applied to small landowners to sign documents they didn't understand, about the clerk in the Cheyenne Land Office who had been paid to amend the federal grant description in 1874, whose name he provided in full, and whose own signed acknowledgement of payment he had, he told the court, been keeping in his father's Bible for 3 years, waiting for a day that felt like this one. When Marcus stepped down from the stand, Emma pressed her hands flat on the table and exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. Cole's hand covered hers briefly. 1 second. Then he took it away. She didn't look at him, but she felt it settle in her chest alongside everything else she had been choosing not to name for 3 weeks. Judge Cross reconvened after the noon recess and spoke for 22 minutes in the careful, measured language of a federal jurist who understands that what he says in a room like this one becomes precedent. The Holt land grant was declared fraudulent and void. The Double H's original homestead claim was confirmed as legally uncontested. The claims of the 11 displaced families were referred to the Federal Land Commission for immediate review, and Victor Holt was remanded to the custody of the federal marshal standing at the back of the courtroom, who had been waiting there since 10 o'clock that morning on the strength of a wire Reeves had sent to Washington 3 days prior. Holt walked out of the courtroom in handcuffs, without looking at Emma. She watched him go with the particular feeling of something that has been wrong for a very long time being put right. Not triumphant, not relieved. Just correct. Like a column of numbers that finally balances. The 11 families would spend years in the process of recovering what they'd lost. Emma knew that. Courts moved slowly, and bureaucracies moved slower, and the Land Commission would have its own complications and delays and political considerations. But the door was open. The record was set. Thomas Carver's truth, 17 years late, was finally in the official file where it could not be removed. That was enough. That had to be enough. She was standing outside the courthouse in the cold October air when Cole found her. Reeves had gone to file the final paperwork. Marcus Carver had been taken to give a formal statement to the federal marshal. The rest of the crowd had dispersed into the wind and the wide streets of Cheyenne, carrying news in every direction. Cole stood beside her and looked out at the street. "It's over," he said. "The hearing is over," Emma said. "The commission work is just starting." "For the families," he said. "Yes." She looked at him sideways. "Are you all right?" He thought about it. Actually thought about it the way he did when he wasn't going to give her the reflexive answer. "My father spent 20 years building something he was afraid to let me fight for," Cole said. "Because he wanted to protect me." He was quiet for a moment. "I understand that better now than I did this morning." "He kept the letter," Emma said. "He kept Carver's letter all those years. He was going to use it when the time was right." "The time just took longer than he had," Cole said. The wind came down the street between them, cold and clean, and carrying the first real bite of the coming winter. "The 6 weeks are up," Emma said. Cole was quiet. "Actually, they ran out 4 days ago," she said. "We've been in Cheyenne." "I'm aware," Cole said. I still have the rest of Holt's documents, Emma said. The 11 families what I have could help the commission move faster. There are people in Santa Fe and Denver who should receive copies. She turned toward him. I was thinking I'd start there. That's a long road, Cole said. Alone. I've been on long roads alone before. I know you have, he said. Then, after a pause that had weight to it, you don't have to be. Emma looked at him. Cole Hayes was not a man who decorated things. He did not make speeches or reach for beautiful language or soften the edges of what he was saying to make it easier to receive. He stood on the steps of the Cheyenne courthouse in his worn hat and his good coat, and said what he meant the way he always did, plainly, directly, with the specific courage of a man who has already decided he's going to say the thing regardless of how it lands. I know what the contract said, he told her. I know what I offered you and what you agreed to, and what neither of us said it was. I know all of that. He held her gaze. But I also know that you are the first person in 6 years who has been in a room with me and made me feel like the ground was solid. And I am not a man who finds that easily, and I don't expect to find it again, and I think you know that about me by now. Emma's chest was doing its disorganized thing again. I'm not easy to live with, she said. I work long hours and I memorize things and I argue when I think someone is wrong, regardless of whether it's convenient. I noticed, Cole said. And I won't be managed, she said. Not by you, not by anyone. What I found in those ledgers, the rest of Holt's documents that work, isn't finished, and I intend to finish it. That's not negotiable. I'm not negotiating, Cole said. I'm asking. Emma looked at him for a long moment. The Double H needs a proper bookkeeping system, she said finally. Your ledgers before 1878 are a disaster. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. They are, he agreed. That would take at least a year to sort out properly. At least, Cole said. And Ruth will have opinions about it. Ruth has opinions about everything, Cole said. She refilled my coffee this morning without being asked, which means she's already decided. Emma laughed. It came out of her before she could organize it, genuine and sudden and slightly surprised at itself the way laughter sounds when it hasn't had much practice recently. Cole looked at her when she laughed with the expression of a man who has just seen something he intends to spend a considerable amount of time seeing again. All right, Emma said when she had herself back in order. A year. A year, Cole said. And then we revisit. And then we revisit, she agreed. He offered her his arm, the way he had not done once in the entire 6 weeks prior, properly, deliberately, without pretending it was anything other than what it was. She took it. They walked down the courthouse steps together into the cold Cheyenne afternoon. A woman with a satchel full of evidence that would open 11 federal land cases, and a man who had just won back everything his father built. And neither of them said anything for a full block, because some things are understood better in silence than in words. Victor Holt went to federal prison the following spring. The Halverson family received their land back that winter, along with 7 of the other 10 displaced families. The Cheyenne land office clerk, who had altered the federal records, resigned before he could be formally charged and was never seen in Wyoming again. Marcus Carver testified before the Federal Land Commission in December and was given a position as a records examiner. Honest work well suited his father's eye for detail, inherited intact. And at the Double H 12 miles north of Redstone, Wyoming, the ledgers were reorganized from the beginning of the year with a system so precise and clearly documented that August Reeves told Cole it was the finest accounting record he had encountered in 20 years of territorial law. Emma Carter had done them. She was still there when the year ended. She was there the year after that. Some things, when they are finally right, do not need a contract to hold them together, only the courage to stay, and the wisdom to know at last that staying is not the same as surrendering. It is, in fact, the bravest thing a person can do.